Wonderful, wonderful. Well, welcome to February and welcome to this amazing panel of speakers that we have this month. It's an exciting time, an exciting year. Everybody's alive and in the throes of everything between the start, setting those big goals, first quarter, looking back, prepping for the tax man. So we're going to distract ourselves from all of that. We're going to be talking about something that's a little bit more fun, which is the love of reading. And I really am just grateful that we can be here together and share in this conversation. I'm very grateful to our panelists today, who you guys are going to get to hear from, learn from, and hopefully grow from. As a reminder, this is a community event, so we do have people that come cameras off and exist just in the chat or they're just listening. And we have others that are willing to be part of the conversation. And we invite you that if you do have something you want to add, comments, questions, kudos, anything positive, go ahead and raise your hand. This is an evolving conversation. We want to make sure that you feel heard and that you're part of this committed community. Um, Having the opportunity to share this with our community is a big deal. And I think more than we realize, when somebody writes a book, it's an opportunity for people to learn and grow in a different way, right? Reading is one of the most powerful things we can do because if you can read, you can learn anything. But it also invites somebody into a very personal interaction inside of themselves and how they interpret this reading and inside of the mind of the author, which I think is a really fantastic and dynamic relationship that a lot of us sometimes overlook when we're rushing through. So I'm really, really, really grateful that we could have this conversation. I'm sure it's going to be a wonderful, evolving conversation of context and excitement and energy. And just so everybody knows, one of the things we always do is we introduce ourselves before this conversation starts. And since we have so many people on today, I'm going to go ahead and say this out loud. If you'd like to introduce yourself and your camera is currently off, please let me know by raising your hand. Otherwise, we're just going to pass the baton to those that are live and talking with us today, and I will start that. So my name's Adam Griggs. I'm your moderator. I get the opportunity to have such wonderful connected people around me and lead the discussion today, and I am so very grateful and excited to share. And of course, I'm going to throw it over to one of our special community members, Mr. John Antonucci, to introduce himself.
Hello, my name is John Antonucci. I am the founder of SML Consultive and just happy to be here when I'm able to. Last month, I think I didn't even get to introduce myself because I was in my car. So I'm glad to be able to be here and be present at my desk with to learn from the people that are sharing today.
Love it. Absolutely. Proud to have you here. And of course, business comes and goes. We're on the move in a car or not. So thank you for being here. Amy B., would you like to introduce yourself?
Absolutely. So my name is Amy Benzowitz. I am a marketer, and I have to say I've done some reading from all the different authors here today, and they are all inspirational, educational, and fun. So I'm looking forward to today's session.
Wonderful, Amy. Thank you for being here and being part of the conversation. Mel VK, would you like to just shout out and say hi?
Yeah, just say hi. I work at GoDaddy for those of you who have not met me yet, but most of you have, and work with Jonathan, Autumn, Lisi, Tom, Joe, that are all here. Fantastic. And I have a 9-year-old daughter who did a self-published book, but is very much into wanting to be an author. So I love hearing from you and all of your perspectives on how to help support her as she actually grows into hopefully becoming a real publisher one day or, small business owner running books. So thanks.
That is so cool. I love that. Thank you for sharing that with us. I love hearing that there are still kids out there that are looking to bring their own writing to life, especially self-publishing. That's such a cool experience at 9 years old. How wild. Thank you for being here with us today. And of course, the rest of the community members, thank you for being here. Let's get a roll on introducing our amazing special guests. So I'm going to start with you, Brandy. Do you want to introduce yourself, the name of your book, and give us a little bit of a little tip of the iceberg and who you are?
Sure. I'm Brandy Lawson. I am the author of Higher Help, a book published October of, I'm like, wait, what year is it? October of 23. I run an agency called Fiery Effects. We are a consultant and systems agency, specifically at this point helping kitchen and bath design businesses. I've run my business for 12 years. I am a wife and a mother, and I will say reluctant author. Like that was not on my dream board to be an author. But I do really like to speak and educate people, and thus why I ended up publishing a book. So, tip of the iceberg.
Well, I will say thank you for being here. And it is on my dream board to be an author. So you're inspiring to so many. So thank you for being here and sharing with us.
Yeah.
Miss Emma.
Yes, that's me. I'm Emma Lawrence, and I founded Life is Coaching You and have been coaching recently, but have been phasing that out. I love writing and I love singing, and I think I'm going more in those two directions with music and writing. What else about me? I'm here in Minneapolis, Minnesota, where it is below zero and has been below zero for several days in a row. So we're feeding the birds and the squirrels and the turkeys and whoever else comes to the backyard so that they can get through the winter. But I'm really grateful to be here. I always love to be in the company of writers and those interested in writing. They have the most fascinating things to say. Looking forward to hearing it.
Oh, I would agree with that. And thank you for being here. Thank you for sharing your warmth with us. And of course, as business owners, a fellow one myself, sometimes we're squirrels. So you're feeding us with your information.
You're so good at this, Adam. You just tie it right in.
And thank you for chasing your passion, by the way, Emma. I think that there's a lot of merit that needs to go to that in celebration. So kudos. Mr. Graziano, Jonathan.
Hi everyone, my name is Jonathan Graziano, and I'm a part of the GoDaddy community as well as a part of the small business community here. And I am the author of a children's book called Noodle and the No Bones Day. And I have another book that came out. We had a sequel come out as well called Noodle Conquers Comfy Mountain. And although these are very different than a lot of the other books that are going to be shared here, they are very near and dear to my heart. And I'm so privileged to have gotten the opportunity to do this. And it happened in a really roundabout way. And I've learned a lot. And it's not something that I've ever taken for granted. And it's just it's a very cool thing.
Absolutely love it. And I love the message that you have in your children's books, and so proud to have you here with us, not just in the community, but sharing your perspective on bringing that book to life today, Jonathan. So thank you. And our final panelist today, Mr. Patrick Kagan. Would you like to introduce yourself?
Sure. Thank you. And I'm glad to be here and glad to be surrounded by the other panelists for sure. So I'm Patrick Kagan. I'm the founder of PK Solutions Group, and we specialize in sales teams, leadership teams, and overall corporate structure. And so I've authored and self-published 3 publications. The first one working on it's called Sell the Difference, and it's working on creating differentiation, creating a category of one in the sales world. Then there's a leadership book. They're right behind me here, actually. Create the Difference, and that's how leaders can create the difference within those that they lead. And then I've got one that's audiobook only, so that little thing back there, it's hard to display an audiobook. It's called Clear Leader, Kind Leader, and it's on the premise of how leaders can be more effective just through clear communication. And I'm just glad to be here.
We're so proud to have you here, Patrick. Thank you for being part of this team and, of course, being the difference, right? And that is a great way to segue into our conversation. And I think you are a wonderful example of this. When you're an author, you are different. I mean, really, you are choosing to bring to life so much, whether it be a children's book, whether it be something that you fell into, right? You didn't know you wanted to be an author, whether it be something that's passionate and collaborative, or whether it be something that's designed to really bring to life the inspiration and idea that you can do something different, you can create a better experience, and you can elevate your own business. I think there's so much to that. So because we have so many different authors on with us today, I want to ask the easy question, and hopefully they're easy answers, but we never know, because I think there's so many people in the community that have thought probably time and time again, what is it like to bring a book to life? Or am I the person that's right to bring my words of inspiration into something tangible like a book? and who am I to do so? So my first question to our panelists, and I'm going to throw this right back at you, Patrick, was when did you know you wanted to be an author? I mean, like really, when did you know?
I mean, it's that little voice. I probably knew a long time ago, probably, back when I was in high school, which wasn't that long ago. If you look at me, you can tell. Um, I think everyone has that voice inside. You have something to say, something that's meaningful. And then when you're speaking, you're talking, or communicating in a group, it starts to resonate. You start to realize you can reach other folks. So there wasn't that one moment where I went, "Oh, you know what? I'm gonna become an author. I'm gonna write down these things. I'm gonna be an author." And I have a lot of folks who ask me, like, "I have this idea for a book, or I want to be an author like you." I think it's important to get to, like, what's the deeper value to you to just writing a book? Are you trying to get rich? Are you trying to be J.K. Rowling, who is rich? Are you trying to do self-help? Are you just doing it because it's a checklist? It's something you want to accomplish. So, I mean, everyone's going to have their own point. Everyone probably sitting here is thinking about either writing a book, helping somebody write a book. They've got an idea about a book, or they just like reading books. They want to hear what gets you going. So I think you just have to listen to yourself. If you have thoughts and ideas that are creative, just start writing them down. Don't worry about if it's bound between two covers and on a bookshelf and somebody tags it a bestseller. That's not really what authoring a book is about. So I think for me, it was a long time ago, but I never thought I'm going to set out to be an author. It didn't happen by accident, but it happened when it was supposed to happen for me.
I love that answer. And for somebody that leads with content, it's amazing when you look up and realize that you probably already have a book that's out there. It's just, like you said, not bound and pretty with a nice spine and a name on it, right? So
Everybody you talk to has a book within them. There's absolutely no doubt about it because everybody has a unique story to tell and somebody can relate to it. So everybody is potentially an author.
love it. Yeah, and you're right. And everybody's got so much inside of them, a voice that's meant to be heard. Just different variables and when and where. And I love that you said that it came to light when it was meant to. Same question for you, Emma. I mean, when did you know when you wanted to be an author?
Yeah, so for me, it's a little different in the sense of as Patrick said, I didn't know I wanted to be an author. It was really more a realization of who I was, who part of me was. I mean, I've been writing since I was, since I could write, since I was taught to write, I've been writing. And I remember in sixth grade having this assignment of writing an autobiography. Isn't that the sweetest thing? Sixth grade English teacher says, write an autobiography. I remember that. I wrote poetry in junior high. I started songwriting in high school, always with a diary, always with a dream journal, so always writing, writing, writing. And so it just took decades to own it. So I'm of the mind that if you write, you're an author. You don't have to if you want to be a published author, that's different. But if you consistently write, you're already an author.
I really love that. I think that there's power to that because so many of us choose platforms that are not necessarily print, especially when we're interacting in a community or leading with intention and we're trying to create valuable resource or even insights. I mean, that's already difficult enough to take that leap of faith and trust yourself and put that out into the world. So kudos to you for sharing that. And I appreciate that. And I feel like it's validating for so many. So thank you, Emma. Brandy, I know you said you never wanted to be an author. So what shifted?
To be fair, I think I still don't want to be an author, but that's not. Well, it was really less about the definition of someone who writes a book and more about like the reason that my book exists is because I have a podcast. And so season 2 of my podcast was my book. And then my COO kindly pointed out to me that I could put it into a book. And really the podcast process and even the book process for me was more about some intellectual rigor around examining specific ideas. And the reason that it went from being season 2 of the podcast into being a book is quite honestly, I'm like, guys, I figured this out. So please like shortcut the stuff and use this information to do better because I mentor other digital agencies, and I've worked with clients. And watching this like gap between someone who knows what you need and their ability to bring it to the people who need it was infuriating. And I'm like, we can do better. So that is the reason that I was convinced to encapsulate it into a book, because then it is something more tangible and easier to reference, and people could read it and make notes. And it's wonderful to have this resource now, because then I start to have conversations with potential clients or business owners. I've had people tell me that they are not letting anybody be their client until after they've read the book, because it's sort of the guide about how to get the most out of this relationship that most businesses need. So it really was less about being an author and more about sharing what I've figured out in a way that might help more people.
I love that. How to get more out of the relationship is such a big deal. And for so many writing books that are related to business or self-development or even discovery, I think that those words create such a ripple effect that you'll never see. And I know you said you lead digital agencies and the intention was to help them, but the amount of opportunity and the elevated experience that you've given and gifted them to their clients will dwarf everything. So I'm glad that you decided to shift from podcasts and get yourself, a book that helps not just validate that, but create that tangible tool that people can really look at, take notes, and discover, and then hopefully share, right? That's the idea. You put it out in the world, you're hoping they're going to share it. So thank you for those insights, Brandy. I really appreciate that. Mr. Jonathan, when did you know you wanted to be an author, my friend?
When I was like forever, but it was never just an author. It was all of these different things that I one day kind of like just finally concluded that it was a storyteller. And that's just something that I've always wanted to do. I never knew what that was. Like even as a kid, I remember being like, well, you can't really go to school for storytelling, but you can go to school for communications and you can go to an art school that has a communications department and you can just kind of dip your toe in everything. So my whole life has been just trying to figure out like how can I go about it's just the thing that I love to do, whether it's through like an intention of like a hobby of mine or it's just what I get the most out of in my free time, whether it's talking to people or watching a really good TV show. Um, and so during when everything happened with my dog, when my dog and I got really popular on TikTok over lockdown, and there was a lot of attention around him and the way that our little routine helped people with their feelings. It was such an amazing opportunity to tell stories. It was an incredible platform for storytelling. And he had so much dense lore to him because he was this silly, hilarious old dog who deserved to be famous. And having the opportunity to sort of encapsulate that and have publishers come to us, I was very fortunate in that we had publishers come to us and say like, hey, we want to do this. And I was very fortunate in the position to get to say like, okay, but and I got to be very picky and very fussy. And I got to tell a story. And I got to tell a story that is crystallized and gets to stick around forever. And it's attuned to feelings and it's very it's very easy to read and it's a picture book, so my words are fabulous, but I have to imagine that the illustrations are a lot of people's favorite thing. But that's what I've always wanted to do, is tell stories, and I found a way to do that.
Love that. I love the fact that you have brought back this image, right? We always have that image of the inner child screaming to get out, and you, sir, are a living example of that, right?
Constantly catering to that little bastard.
Yeah, no, you know what? It's wonderful because you did it because you had a reason, an emotional push, and something that tied you to something beautiful, which was your relationship with your dog. And you did it in a meaningful way that said, no, I'm going to do it my way. I get to be picky. I get to be, understanding of what I want this to look like. And you brought it to life. And I don't know that you can't go to school to be an author. I'll share a little story with you. I was going to bring it today. I actually have a little trophy from when I was in kindergarten. I wrote an essay about wanting to grow up to be an author. And I got a little trophy in kindergarten about wanting to be an author. And I've had it ever since. And I have never actually written a book, right? I've never finished and written and published a book. Yeah, I wish I brought the trophy. I'm going to send pictures. I'm going to go home. I'm going to put it on the community. I can't believe I forgot it.
Why it is not within arm's reach at all times, I'll never know.
Right. But there's always that image of growing up has to be XYZ, right? And when you write a book, it's kind of a rediscovery of what's possible. It's your voice, it's your perspective, and really how you convey that to the world is nobody else's right. It's yours. Yes, you want readers to interpret and learn from it and grow from it, but at the end of the day, whether or not they buy it isn't the reason you write. You write it because you have a passion for that. And I love that it's what you did with your book, with both books. And it's so different when you write a children's book versus writing something that's developmental or working with a group, right? Working on leadership. There's so many different dynamics when you're writing these different styles of your voice and bringing it to life and how the community engages it and interprets it and loves and grows from it. So kudos to you for rediscovering that and sharing that with us because I think that's such a big deal for so many because you're Jonathan a GoDaddy, but you're also Noodle's dad, right? That's a big
Right.
deal.
It's like Sailor Moon.
Yes, fighting evil by moonlight, my
By
friend.
moonlight, baby.
I love
But
it.
thank you. I appreciate that. It's been one of the reasons why I was able to do so much of this is that I've had such wonderful support and I had like it is. I'm very fortunate in a lot of ways.
Oh, I love that. The support's a big deal. So my next question that I'd love to ask our panelists is what was the experience like for you? And I think because each of you had such a different experience bringing the book to life from start to finish, right? When you sat down and decided you were going to write it, working through it and getting it onto the shelves and out into the real world. What was the experience like for you? And I want to throw this one to Emma because Emma wrote a collaborative book. Like she wrote a
Yeah.
book with a group of people. So
Yeah.
I'd love to start with your perspectives, Emma.
I did. I realized I didn't say what my book was at the beginning here. My book is Leading with Self-Awareness, Starting from the Inside Out. And as I've constantly been writing, right? So the principle here, takeaway principle is if you keep writing and keep honing your craft, one day someone might call you and say, would you like to write a chapter in this book? I really do believe that as we keep growing as writers, opportunities open up and we take those opportunities, right? So I got a call from the founder of Changing Work, and Changing Work is it's a nonprofit collective that supports conscious business practices. And the idea is to help people change work from the inside out. So they were going to do this book and effectively be the publishers of the book. And was I interested in contributing a chapter to that? And I absolutely was. The experience was the writing experience was fabulous. They hired a great editor. They hired a social media person. We worked in groups, although I didn't work too much with my group, actually. You know how writing can be solo and you just kind of got to get it out. But I wrote a chapter. We were all writing chapters about a moment as a leader when we experienced a higher self-awareness, when we learned something about ourselves. And the structure was, can you tell the story? Can you say what you learned from it? And then can you share how someone else might benefit? Now, that's a typical three-part structure. Those of you who might be writing nonfiction, that's a very typical structure that someone might use, and writers certainly need structure. At least I do, and I know a lot of writers who do. So it was a total joy to write. The brief was write 2,000 words plus or minus 10% on this and send it in and to the editor, and she'll work with you on it. Very fortunately, I sent it in, and the writer said that was effing brilliant, and that was kind of pretty much done, which was lovely. But that experience was great. The publishing experience was a little bit different, and you may want to ask that in a different question, Adam. But the writing experience was fantastic to be part of a team that kept meeting, a larger group that kept meeting, and that the brief was doable, and that it was part of something that became a bestseller on Amazon because they know how to do that, right? So then that was a positive result as well.
I love it. Now, I think that that's a wonderful experience that you've shared with us because for multiple reasons. Number one, there's an evolution in what writing looks like, right? It's not necessarily some person in the woods at a cabin with a cup of tea writing, the next great Harry Potter, series, right? it can be collaborative now. It can be something that maybe it's just a chapter, maybe it's a book between two people, maybe it's intimately sharing stories. And I love that your experience allowed you to just write. You had so much support built into getting this book to life, between publishing, editing, and everything else that people want to shy away from. That usually is the reason we're fearful, right? You got a chance to really experience what your writing looked like, and you got to do it in an environment that created momentum because there was a lot of camaraderie. And I think that that's a really cool thing that maybe some of the community members that are listening to this later might want to think hard on, because there's so much value to that. And even if you're not co-writing a book, building momentum amongst others that are also authoring a book is a great way to inspire and build you up. Emma, you and I have shared some time where you've gone through and given me some tips on writing, and I really appreciate you for that. I think that there's a lot of value to having that outreach, and I really appreciate you sharing that part of your experience.
Absolutely. It's fun.
It
Community, right, Adam?
Yes,
In community.
community is everything. Mr. Kagan, same question, my friend. What was the experience like for you writing your book?
Yeah, the experience was rewarding, for sure. And so I was a little bit different than Emma's process because I was like, I got to enjoy the creative part where you do, the writing and the framing and putting it together. But I self-published all three of my books. So there's a lot of the stuff that's kind of a grind to be an author, like the business of a book, meeting with publishers, meeting with editors, meeting with proofreaders, meeting with printers, deciding not to send it out to a publisher, but to self-publish myself. There's always the business of getting your book sold, right? And so there's that side of it. Um, and every part of it was rewarding because the relationships that I made within that community, and then when things went into audiobook, the people over at Spotify and the Google platform, they're phenomenal. They're great to work with. Chirp is a great nugget I found. It's a platform where you don't have to sign up for a new account to listen to audiobooks. So what came out, what I started was these books that are going to help round out my business, kind of like what Brandy talked about. So I have a podcast, I've got blogs, then I've got my consulting, and they kind of were separate little things. And this stitched everything together where there's something for everybody, that they can use. So it really rounded out my offering. So on the low end of price for somebody, they can read a blog article, they can listen to a podcast. There's no charge. Maybe they want to hire me to coach them, but they can't afford that, so they can buy a book, which is a self-help guide and a blueprint along the way. And then maybe they want to coach. So it really rounded things out together. But the extended family and community that I built that I just didn't even know before I started getting into books has proved invaluable. I mean, so that it's one thing to say, I read a book, and I would challenge everybody, look at your own LinkedIn profile or think about how you introduce yourself. And is the word author the first thing you say when someone says, what do you do? Do you say, I'm the vice president of this, or I work at GoDaddy, or I whatever? Or do you say, I'm an author? Say it loud, say it proud. You are an author, right? And even if you sold one copy, you're an author. Like Rama said, if you write, you're an author. But I had to rework my whole LinkedIn profile, and I had to practice saying that to people, that that's what I do. But it changes your conversation with people. It's their perception, of, oh, wow, oh, you wrote a book. Oh, where do I get it? Now, will you get it is different. Where you get it's another question. So the experience itself, even if you never publish. So Adam, you're talking about wanting to publish your book, but you've been writing and you've been digging in. That experience for you in and of itself is invaluable. You can't even equate to people who haven't even taken that first step what you're getting out of this, and how your conversations change when you talk to people about doing this. And then there's just a matter of doing it. So writing the book is easy. It's like I tell people, getting married's easy, staying married's different. So, writing the book isn't that hard. And there's a whole, way I tell people to do it. But the experience itself, I think that it's worth everybody doing. If you've ever thought about writing it, is that just start.
What a cool thing to share. I mean, the experience of writing is one thing, but the experience that you got to really be aware of, which is the evolution of camaraderie, your family, friends, people that came out of this, rounding out what it felt like to be Patrick and be an author as opposed to being a title. I think that that's a valuable thing to really think about because if you are writing and you're writing with intention and you bring it to life, that's something that we need to embrace. It's identity, it's an evolution of who you are. And I think bringing it to life is such a difficult thing when it comes to overcoming fear, not necessarily the task of writing, like you're saying, and then maintaining that identity and putting that forth as like, this is me, as opposed to falling back into the default of I'm here because of XYZ and I need to get XYZ out of this. I think that that's a valuable thing, Patrick. And I love that you've shared on that because for somebody that's very, very involved in teaching people the right way to conduct business and to make sure that you are differentiating yourself in the world, you just shared with us that one of the ways you differentiated yourself is by being an author. And it's because of the experience. It's not necessarily because there's print on paper, right? So thank you for that. I really do appreciate those valuable insights. Brandy, how was the experience of bringing your book to life? How was writing your book for you?
Well, so again, mine's kind of different because I started with the transcripts of season 2. So I'd already recorded 26 episodes, started with the transcripts, had a lot of support from my team because I don't know if anyone else experiences this, but like when I record something, when I am in pictures, when I have to go face like me, uh, there's a lot of avoidance that happens. Maybe it's just me. So having my team being able to like give me a draft or put things in and or assign me tasks so that I could work through it with less wild procrastination and avoidance was really useful and the only reason that the book got done. Also, I leveraged AI to help me because the blank page is my kryptonite. You give me something to edit, I am happily editing, editing, editing. You give me a blank page, and my office has never been so clean. My taxes, done. Like anything to not do the thing in front of me. So, writing the book was really a series of me getting out of my own way with the help of a lot of people. And working through it. But the last bit, the sort of like taking it to the finish line, and the word count was there, editing, I was able to do that sitting on the shores of Ennis Lake in Montana at my sister lake house. So going out in the morning and getting the laptop and like looking out and editing and knowing that I was at the like last little bit was joyful. Getting there was a bunch of work and a bunch of practice using my tools to just deal with my humanness.
That's too funny. I love that. I didn't realize that I was insulting you when I said not everybody's the typical author on the shoreline drinking their tea and typing on their laptop.
See, that would the final 5%, not the first 95%. The first 95%, nothing that anyone is going to encapsulate in a picture or a story.
That's so fun. I think that's cool because for two reasons. Number one, you brought it to life and it was difficult, but you needed the structure. And Emma mentioned this earlier. You needed the structure. You had the content, you had the community that wanted you to bring this to life. And so you had that back end of let's build it this way. Let's put some things into works. And it's an overnight success of you writing this book, right? And that's there's a lot of value to your perspective and what you've shared because the experience in taking what you have already created and make it something that's more tangible, more surreal, and more really transitional for people because it's hard to piece together everything in a right way. There's a lot of value to that. And I commend you for doing that and doing the hard work and bringing it to life because yes, you had a team and yes, you had to put some structure in, but so many of us fear that blank page. So many of us fear what it could look like later down the road. And are we doing ourselves a disservice? Are we saying it the wrong way? Is it going to be something that falls flat or, you know, and it's so hard to get past that. So kudos to you for, again, taking that structure and making strides in your writing. And I think
I will add one small thing, not necessarily about the writing, but in order for me to do what I needed to do to publish the book, I had to change what I believed. And so I had to be like, when I put this into print, it is not chiseling it in stone. I had to believe that an imperfect product was better than nothing and fight the perfectionist along the way. And give into the like, if I needed to, there could be a second edition. There, like really letting go of the when I let it out into the universe, it will never be anything else. Because I couldn't have done any of it without shifting that belief.
I thank you for saying that. For one, you shared that you utilized tools to help you get to the finish line, which I think is valuable. I think so many people need to understand that it's okay to utilize tools to keep you going and make sure that it's done the right way. But a lot of people don't realize when you're buying a book, it says updated and revised edition. There's reasons for that, right? There's reasons for that. It's got to be modernized. It's got to be brought to the forefront. And maybe somebody forgot something or there's a correction or whatever, and it's okay. Get it out into the world. Let it exist. Enjoy the process. So thank you for that, Brandy. I think that the belief is one of the things that so many of us need to overcome, and shifting our mindset to bring that. So I appreciate you for that. Mr. Graziano, Jonathan, what was your experience like, my friend, when you were writing your book?
Nuts. And it was wild. But it's very interesting. I totally agree with what Brandy said, because even writing a book that was 500 words, and those were small words. You really care about every single one. And you really, really care about them in a way that's, you can go be very neurotic about it. You can sit here and go, okay, well, am I going to be proud of this in 5 years? Is this going to be great in 20 years? Like, what if this is old? Like, what if this isn't true anymore? And it is. It's as exciting as it was, and as much as it was just something that was happening, it's so exciting to think that something's going to be out there for a long time, and that is also very scary. Especially, and I can't even imagine if it was something where it was like this is what I know, and this is me teaching you, this is you learning from me. Like, this was very much, a story. This is a little story. But it's so true. Like, no matter what it is, you have to take yourself out of it. When as hard as that is to do, you have to take yourself out of it and sit there and just think, what is the value of this? And is this worth my time? And is this worth my energy? And is this worth X, Y, Z? And for me, it very much was, because I had a lot of help. As I said, I had a lot of help, and I was just in a fortunate situation where I had not been pitching publishers. Like, I went to a school that had a huge publishing department. Like, this industry is not easy for even celebrated, very accomplished people. So having the opportunity to do that was something that I knew was going to be something that might never happen again. But it was a real exercise in being fearless. It was an exercise in being fearless, and even in working with an illustrator and just being like, who am I to tell this person, to give critiques on someone's art or someone's work, but like, I'm hiring you to illustrate this book, and I'm a crazy person, and it's gonna look the way I need it to look. And I also am, that's the other thing about, and a lot of people who have said that they weren't ready to be publishers or they didn't plan on it. Like, I don't stand by everything that I say. I speak without thinking all the time. And it's something I've tried very hard to work against. But the idea that what I could write is forever, and I don't get to sit there and say, like, actually, like, I would love to do a revised version of Noodle and the No Bones Day. I'd love to send out a new one and be like, no, but I thought of such more clever stuff 6 months later. That's not how it goes. So it was so much about just letting myself be fearless in the way that I was very open to these opportunities that were coming my way, and I didn't want anyone to think that I was being too picky. But then at the same time, you sit there and you go, but this is in a way, this is my reputation. Like, if I'm going to publish this, if my name's going to go on this, I understand I want to publish a book. Is this something that and there's a difference between, oh, I don't like that line versus I wish that this wasn't out there. And there were a lot of people who got really big on social media, and they had a lot of publishers come up to them, and they made books very quickly. And those books were made to be sold. And I wanted to make a book that you didn't have to know who I was, you didn't have to know who Noodle was, you didn't have to know a damn thing, but you could pick that book up off the shelf and you could fall in love with it. You could love the story. And then it would be fun at the very end if and it's happened so many times now, and it's so wonderful when the kid finds out that they're real. Noodle is a real dog, and you can go online and you can see videos of them and stuff like that. Um, so it was. It's you have to be very vulnerable in doing it, and that's for someone who got puts a lot of stuff out on social media. Like it's a very different kind of vulnerability, and yeah, that I've lost my train of thought now, but that's also the end of my thought.
I like it. The experience in writing a book is very, very different than putting something out. You're correct. And coming to terms with that has got to be a difficulty, especially if you're, a perfectionist or somebody that procrastinates. Those things don't necessarily go hand in hand, but they do trip us up. And when you have something as beautiful as, Noodles and the No Bone Day coming to life, and it's something you want to share with the world, you want to be picky. You want to be very specific into why you're doing it because, you are putting it out into the world. And you mentioned that you weren't necessarily teaching somebody, something very tactical and practical, but you are. It might be more abstract, but it's an emotional thing on how we love ourselves and love each other. And there was so much value that came out of your book. And I'm so grateful to you for bringing that to life. My nieces absolutely love that book. And I know for a fact that they now have that built into the back of their mind somewhere that it's okay when you don't feel like having a day of work, you can take time. Self-care is a big deal. And yeah, it might be Noodles that resonates in their mind. We might never know that, right? It's not on a line item. It's not do this to get to XYZ, but you did teach us. You've taught so many what it means to actually put out love openly, whether it be through social media or bringing it to life in a children's book. And I think that it's a beautiful thing. And I'm so glad that you enjoyed the experience and you were able to do it a second time, Jonathan.
Thank you. I so appreciate that. Thank you. It will it never ceases to amaze me.
I, yeah, I'm shocked that I know you. I'm just being honest, and I'm
The Scholastic Book Fair. We got the book fair. I'm near those erasers. You know what I mean? Like
posters, yeah.
that's it, buddy. That is it. It's very, very cool. The illustrator, I'll never forget when I knew the illustrator I wanted to go with. He The first illustration of me he sent through, I was in like cargo shorts and flip-flops, and I was like, you simply must try again. And then he looked at my Instagram and he put me in like my sweats and boots, and I was like, done. But the best, every single illustration of Noodle that he sent through, Noodle was yelling at someone. And that was when I knew that I was like, this person is not illustrating a pug. This person is trying to encapture the personality that is this animal of mine. And it was very much like I could have sat there for another 20 years and picked over options, but I was like, this guy gets it and I'm just going to run with it. And it was the right call.
What a cool experience, and I'm so glad you did. And the Scholastic Books Fair, by the way, was like my favorite thing as a kid. I freaking loved it.
Me too. Oh my gosh, the erasers.
Yes.
Loved them.
And I'm so privileged to be surrounded by the four of you and call you friends. I mean, I think that that's a wonderful thing. And thank you so far for sharing not just your experience, but what it took to become an author and really what got you started. I want to shift gears a little bit, if you guys don't mind. I believe that each of you probably published your books in just a little bit of a different way. So I'd love to hear how, once you had the finished product, how you chose to publish, whether it be through self-publishing, whether it be through collaboration, whether it be through digital and print first, or utilizing, a mainstream publishing house. And I'm going to throw this right back at you, Jonathan.
Great. Yeah, this was like, oh my gosh, you guys. So we have a rep. I've had a rep for a few years now, and we had a bunch of really big publishers just reach out and say, we thought this would be a good idea for a book. And again, a luxury to sit here and just be able to be like, okay, who has the best offer? Who is going to turn this around in a good time? who is gonna, who's got the distribution plan, like all of this different stuff. And I didn't know anything about it, which I also think is very interesting that regardless of what kind of book you do publish, like I didn't know anything about this industry. So I really did just have to trust a lot of people. That is not something that I like to do with things that I'm very precious about. Like I am so down to do that with so many things, but if it's like something that I have created and I want to be I'm very particular about and I feel very strongly about, like it's very hard for me to put that into someone else's hands. Um, but I found I was very fortunate to have a really nice team of people who really believed in this book. And w all along the way, they made it a point to kind of teach me and let me know like this is something to look out for, this is something not to look out for. But I guess one of the biggest things that was really, really interesting was listening to everyone and listening, especially in children's publishing, like what matters a lot to in children's books, what matters a lot in selling children's books, because it's not just, you sell it to the kid, but you have to sell it to the parent. And that's where I was having a lot of fun with, there was so much familiarity with Noodle, and it was a thing where there were a lot of kids and parents that loved this combined. So we were able to just kind of think, okay, well, what do we really have to lean into to get this out? And they were just like, what we know, like you don't have to think too hard about it. And it did it. It just it came out really, really well. And there was a really long process of the writing had to be turned around in like 5 days. So when we found out that we were doing it, we had like 5 days to send through all of the words, because the illustrator needed so much time to work on it, and even his timeline was so tight. So it was rapid, but one of the main things is like I could have never done this alone. With being able to maintain a job, I never would have been able to self-publish or to do something like this. It truly happened because other people willed it to be. And that's something that I claim authorship, but there's so many people who have really put so much out in it because I agree with Emma. Like if you can hit publish on a blog and you are an author, and that no one can take that from you. And so I kind of have that same thing where I'm like, I put words into a book, but like there was no button that I pushed. Like there was none of this. So it really is. It's just about trusting the process and accepting that, people are rooting for you.
Yeah, and it's so cool that you got to attack such a general audience in such a fun way, because you're right. It was kids and parents, and honestly, more than that, my nieces go to school and they see Noodles conquers Comfy Mountain at school, like in their book, like their bookshelves. It's so cool to see that familiarity and know that you're reaching so many different spaces because you have that capability. And I think that that's a fun thing. And I love that you got to work with a publisher, and that part of it was so much fun for you, Jonathan.
Thank you. It was, yeah, I was, yes, very, very much so.
I'm going to throw this one to you, Brandy. What was it like when you published your book, and how did you choose to bring it to life?
So, in order for me to get over all the stuff I would have gotten my way, I had to be clear about what the reason was we were publishing this book. And the reason to publish this book was to encapsulate the knowledge and for me to get more speaking engagements. So with that kind of clarity, I'm also terrible at playing other people's games. So like the idea of writing a bunch of pitches for the book, yeah, it just was not going to happen. So it was very clear I needed to self-publish. And then along the way, I was like, I am literally writing a book about how to use experts. So who is the expert in this field that can help me take this book to the finish line? So I went and interviewed several companies that help with the publishing process, and I interviewed several editors. And so found an editor, went through the editing process, found a person who would take it through the Amazon KDP publishing process and have a plan and like tell you how to do the launch and all, which is what I wanted because again, I wrote a book about using experts. So we picked a partner. They helped develop the cover. Having a real clear goal about why I was doing this made the rest of those decisions easier. They were like, "Are you going to be on the cover?" I'm like, "Well, it's supposed to help me get more speaking gigs, so yes." Like, because otherwise I would have waffled with that decision a long time. So clarity, picking the right partners, and then letting them lead us, and doing what they said.
That's awesome. And so much value in what you just mentioned, by the way. You wrote the book to expand your professional reach, but your book actually taught you to reach back into the community and utilize those professionals. And it's so cool that you got to do that while bringing this book to life. What a cool, cyclical experience. So thank you for that. I think that that's awesome. Emma, what was it like, or how did you choose to publish your book? With
Well, I guess that part was kind of baked in to when I was asked to write the chapter. But I am thinking back as I'm listening to the other authors about what it was like to self-publish, because my first book was self-published and it was a very short thing and it was done in the style of a children's book. So I hired an illustrator and all that kind of thing and self-published, but I did not have the confidence to bring that into print. It stayed as an ebook. I didn't even like set it up on Amazon. I did, it was that kind of thing. It taught me so much about my writing, and I wasn't able to go all the way, like Brandy's talking about. You got to be able to go the distance. And what is it that helps you go the distance? And in my case, it was definitely community. It was the fact that all of us were talking about our moments of self-awareness, and we wanted to help other people at work be able to recognize their self-awareness moments, recognize what leadership really meant to them, and tell these stories to inspire them to be the authentic leaders in their work environment. So that was really that. The publishing, when we shifted to having the social media person come in and so on, we still as authors had to do a lot of work. We had to do our launch teams. I had been part of a good friends launch team, so I knew what that was like. And I was able to help other authors to be able to do that. But we're the reason we are an Amazon bestseller, because the authors, the 25 authors, did what it took for that to be able to happen. And we were told what it took by the social media person. This is what it's going to take. And yeah, and we, three different categories. So it's possible. In that sense, they knew how to work the system, but we needed to do the work and have a lot of, again, we're talking about how much help we get, a lot of people in our own communities that were willing to write reviews or read advanced copies, or, Amy was part of my launch team, weren't you? Yeah.
Love it. Now, in having that community camaraderie, running those, those book launch meetings and those celebrations, doing the heavy lifting when you bring something to work, whether it be through a publisher or self-publishing or even through a collaborative experience like yours, Emma, that takes a lot of tenacity. It takes a lot of endurance and understanding that you did the writing, which you enjoyed, and now maybe it's not so much the enjoyable part, but you got to get it into the hands of the people that matter so they can experience it. So thank you for sharing that. And Autumn, I know you have your hand up. I'm going to open it up to you before we throw it to Patrick.
Yes, I actually have to leave for a meeting, but I just wanted to share a little story that this meeting just kind of made me realize that I guess I kind of am trying to be a writer. So I love books. I read books. I've never wanted to write a book at all. Still probably never will. But I'm starting a blog/vlog/podcast about reading books that have movies. So I'm going to be writing about books and movies and the differences between that. I think it's mainly for me, but it's funny because I never thought of myself as a writer, even though I'm technically writing my website at the moment, writing a blog about other books. So I guess I kind of am a writer, and I just wanted to share that I kind of just realized that right now.
That's awesome. No, kudos to you. And you're right. You know what? There's so much that's taken away from our imaginations when things are brought to life in a movie. So it'll be exciting to hear and read, what your takeaways are for that. Hopefully, you'll share that with the community with us.
As soon as it's ready, I will share it with you guys.
Wonderful.
Thank you so much. And I do have to go for another meeting, but I say this every time. I love getting together with you guys, and I love seeing new faces. So thank you all for coming, and I'll see you in a couple weeks.
Thanks, Autumn. We appreciate it.
Thank you.
Mr. Patrick, what platform did you choose to bring your books, plural, onto?
Yeah, yeah. So I hired a coach, and he's over in England, and he's very well published, and he just got an award for like Speaker of the Year. So he's pretty good. And he helped me through the process of just finding out, making sure I knew what the content was about, who was it for, what would it do for them. And then he had me go through things that were important to me, right? What's my deeper value? So I had to, envision that I wanted salespeople and sales leaders and teams to have this book in their hands and ragged edges and on their desk, and they carry it on the train. So he's like, so durability is going to be important. I'm like, oh yeah, so hardcover, right? What about through the years? Will they use it through the years? Yeah, they'll use it through the years. Anti-yellowing paper. Yep, that's important to me. And he's like, you're a military veteran. Is that important to you? I'm like, yeah, yeah. So he's like, so do you want to have it be made in the USA? Yeah, I do. I wanted it to be printed and done by military owned or veteran owned small businesses. Support my community, right? All that was really really important. So I got to the point that he's like, all right, so then you have to go talk to some publishers, and he sent me to a few, and I met with the folks at Amazon and everything else, and the more I talked to them, just I got the sense that what was important to me wasn't necessarily important to the folks I was talking to. I think Jonathan talked about, it was the difference between like printing a book for sale versus authoring what was in my heart. And all the things that were important kept leading back to that's not the way I want it. And then they kept asking me questions like, well, what are you going to do to sell this book? And I went into it naive thinking they're going to sell my book. And it was, no, you're going to sell your book. We're going to put our name on it. We're going to distribute it. We're going to do this, that. So I concluded that for me, the best fit was just to self-publish, knowing that I was going to work equally as hard. It wasn't going to be, I could hand it off and it's done. Because if I went the public, using the publisher, I'd still have to do the work. So I'm like, well, if I'm going to do the work anyway, and I'm glad I did. I would have missed all those relationships I talked about earlier in our conversation had I handed it off to somebody to check off their list and do. I also, there was a lot of, for me, it was the way I wanted it to be, not the way they wanted it to be. So it didn't feel like the right fit. So self-publishing became very evident to me that was the way I was going to go. So my book, you'll never find it on Amazon, because that's not, it won't be an Audible. That's the only platform. There's 43 audiobook platforms you will find them on, and you can buy my books through my website. But it did afford me the opportunity to do things like when the second book was coming out, negotiate better to get better pricing because I was proven, right? A lot of times you author a book, you're unproven. You'll do whatever they want because they know and I don't, all that other stuff. But when you do know what you do know, and it's true to you, then it becomes evident that you're either going to go with a publisher or you're going to self-publish. But don't kid yourself. You're going to work equally as hard, no matter who does that. And then if it comes down to dollars and cents, you'll probably make more profit if you do it on your own, but you're working like crazy. It's the business of selling books versus the creativity of writing a book. So I went through all that, and then the real tell on that is not that I did that, but that I did it 2 more times after. So there are rewards, but I'm not opposed to doing something through Amazon and doing the Audible platform and their way of doing it. It's just that I would have to then be willing to be more flexible, and these ones were really like near and dear to my heart. So I couldn't get there on that. But there's other books that people have talked to me about that I'm not opposed to them. I'm not against them. If I did something like what Emma was doing, I'd have no problem if that was the platform. That was just the platform that fit for me. So.
Oh, thank you for sharing that. And I think it is important that you choose the platform that matters most, especially if it keeps your integrity into what you're developing and bringing to the world intact. You do not want to, you don't want to be a sellout in the negative way. You want to be a sellout because it's valuable information. It's a wonderful book and it's an experience that people can really embrace. So,
well, one of the things that came out, Adam, like when I was going through this with my coach and trying, when you get to the point of trying to set a price, you start to have self-doubt. That saboteur within starts thinking, well, who am I and how could I charge this price, right? And it's really hard to do that. And then you start talking about, well, here's the value of it, this and that. What does it bring? I could have saved a lot of money if I sent this off to China to be printed versus a made in America, veteran-owned small business, that type of thing. But that really went against, like, I'm a veteran-owned small business myself, so it seemed like I would be a liar to do it. So there's that profit conversation, and then there's just like the purpose conversation.
No, and I appreciate that valuable insight. I think that that's a juxtaposition that's difficult to really take in, especially if you're writing a book to embrace and elevate your professional stance, or you're writing a book to make money. Those are very, very different things. So thank you for that, Patrick. I know, Jonathan, you had your hand up.
It's such a good point to think about, what are you going to sell it for? Because it's such a tell on not only what you think the value is, but what you're hoping that other people think the value is too. And it does, those factors matter. Like if you're a veteran and you've owned your own business for X amount of years, like you can and should put a higher price point on it because you have more to share in that. But again, you have to sit here and think, and Patrick, you said it, like, where is it manufactured? Where is it going to be most distributed? Like how many, if I have the option, can it be published in different languages? Like all of these different little things. But that really stuck out to me, was being very thoughtful about, we did the same thing where I was like, I bet people will buy this book. They love Noodle. I am not charging, $35 for a children's book because we know that some people will pay for it. Like that's not something I could stand behind. So finding a price that you really know you can stand behind matters. Because if I had been like a Miss Rachel kind of deal, then that might be very different, because there'd be a whole press that went with it, a whole different time. There's a lot to think about.
Well, Jonathan, to your point, when my first book came out the first time, I had a different price point because that's what the publishers told me. But what I realized was I'm covering a lot of costs for them. So in my mind, that's the price, but I didn't have those costs.
Mm-hmm.
So I went back and renegotiated and got my prices to come down to what I was comfortable with. And also
all that overhead.
The idea of publisher or self-published has less to do with the reader than it does the publisher, because the reader just wants your book. They don't care how you chose to do that.
Yep,
they want access to it. They want it to help them in some way. I mean, they feel good, they grow their business, they learn something about themselves existentially, whatever it is. So this is a conversation about the writer versus the reader.
Yep.
This has been a wonderful conversation. I really appreciate our panelists for sharing the perspective, the experience, and everything in between. I know that we are at the top of our hour. Normally we open it up to comments, questions, and kudos, but I do want to be considerate. So if there's anything that comes to mind after this, drop it in the community, tag us, ask the questions. I would love if our panelists could, of course, share their books in the community one more time, because for the love of reading, February, this is a great time to really share what is on your heart. And you four have put out such beautiful work that people need to read it. People need to experience it and enjoy it, because at the end of the day, we want you to be sell out on a published side, not sell out to the personal side, right? So I want to support you. I want to share that. I want to give the right type of camaraderie into the community, and you sharing your voice, your perspective, and really inspiring others to maybe take the step to be authors themselves is so valuable. And there's not enough gratitude in the world to express that. So thank you for being here and sharing everything with us.
Thanks for making me a part of this conversation. It was great.
Thank you, Adam.
Thank you.
Thanks, Adam. Thanks, everyone.